Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. Today is Friday, July 12th, and today we are going to be coming to you with some updates on the latest NBA media rights deal that they are finalizing right now, where they are going to be making $76 billion over the course of the next 11 years, and sort of what the implications are that come with this type of a deal taking place, what the future of the NBA looks like here in terms of how they will be streaming their games and what it means for our beloved Inside the NBA TNT crew. So we'll be diving into that, some updates around the MLB world as well. Paul Skenes, the rookie phenom for the Pittsburgh Pirates, had another dominant outing yesterday and was rewarded for it by being named the All-Star starter for the National League. So we'll be diving into that game, him being selected, and just the overall incredible season that we are seeing from him. And then we're going to be diving into the Boston Red Sox and their series against the Oakland Athletics and what the future looks like for their manager, Alex Cora, who just within this series became fourth all-time in wins for a Red Sox manager, and yet it seems like the common idea around it is that he will not be in Boston past this year, so we will dive into sort of the makings behind that. And finally, to wrap up the show, we'll come back around to some basketball and talk about the unresolved questions in the NBA. But before we dive into all of that, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section and give us your thoughts and opinions on all of the latest happenings in sports as we try and make this show as interactive as possible. And if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can leave a tip or donation that is streaming across the bottom ticker. With the link streaming across the bottom ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a tip or donation with a comment, and your comment will pop up on screen for everyone to see. Anything would be greatly appreciated there. But as we are coming live here, I don't know if we officially have all the details. It sounds like we have at least the general framework of the NBA's new media mega deal that they are signing. Like I mentioned, $76 billion is what the NBA is looking to profit off of this deal with a number of different media companies, including Disney, NBC, and Amazon. So, you know, making this $76 billion is quite the upgrade over their last media deal that they signed in 2014 that is going to be coming to an end after this upcoming season. That was worth $24 billion, so just about tripling their revenue coming out of this moving forward. The deal includes, like I mentioned, Disney, which is partners with ABC and ESPN, so kind of the typical front there, and then it includes NBC diving back into the world of NBA here. They have been on a little bit of a, you could call it 20-year hiatus, where they were the primary broadcaster for the NBA during the 90s and during the prime years of Michael Jordan. So they're getting back into the game here, and Amazon Prime, as we have seen them sort of pick up a number of different sports. We've seen them with Thursday Night Football the past few years of, you know, enhancing their audience in that way. Kind of made sense that this was going to be a natural step for them. They have rights for the WNBA. We saw last night's game between the Chicago Sky and New York Liberty. That was exclusively streamed on Amazon Prime. So going a step further, Amazon is to add the NBA to their repertoire. We saw, so, you know, they are also actually being listed as the primary streaming service for the NBA's in-season tournament that they just introduced this past year. And I would have to imagine that's why Amazon is paying as much money as they are, $1.8 billion. Now, keep in mind, that's $1.8 billion annually here. And they're paying $1 billion for Thursday Night Football. So I would have to imagine that the reason why they invested as much as they did into the NBA, considering the fact they're probably not going to be during the playoffs, is to get this in-season tournament, which is exactly what the NBA wants. And Charles Barkley, who we're going to be diving into him a little bit later as well, sort of alluded to the fact that the NBA is basically just fixating on making as much money as possible, which, it's reality with businesses, across the world, entertainment or not, and sort of leaving the fans out and cutting them out to some degree. And when the league introduced this in-season tournament, I think that this is the exact result that they wanted, that some other media company was going to get involved and invest into that specific product. So, we'll see how all of that plays out. But the annual revenue breakup from each media, or from each coverage provider, is as follows. Disney paying $2.6 billion per year. NBC paying $2.5 billion. Like I mentioned, Amazon $1.8 billion, which makes a grand total around $7 billion as a whole. Now, finals are exclusively going to be streamed on ESPN and ABC per usual there. This new deal is going to kick off for the 2025-26 season and is going to last through 2037. It does notably not include Turner Sports and TNT. And to me, this didn't come as a huge surprise. It's been not a very well-kept secret that Turner did not seem like they were going to be able to afford to stay in the race here with the NBA moving forward, which, of course, is a little bit of a sore subject for a lot of basketball fans, considering the fact that inside the NBA, with that entire crew, Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, Shaquille O'Neal, and Charles Barkley, has been one of the most popular sports broadcasts across all sports, at least in America. And there is definitely a question mark surrounding what the future looks like for them. Seems like this is going to be the last season that we see this group of four incredibly entertaining basketball minds together on one broadcast. And not sure where it's going to go from here. Ernie Johnson said that or at least it's been reported that he is expected to stay with Turner Sports and that he's not going anywhere. Charles Barkley is going to be a free agent. He's talked before on multiple occasions about the fact that he sees himself retiring in the coming years. We'll see whether or not he does stick to that plan. He would make a lot of money, and everybody on this crew would make a lot of money if they did, if they wanted to continue broadcasting and, being a part of a media company. But, Barkley is probably my favorite of the group. He is just so incredibly funny, and it was interesting to me when he stepped in for the booth during the Stanley Cup Finals, which were aired on ESPN. So Barkley, basically acting as if he was a free agent, he just kind of hopped in briefly there with Steve Levy, PK Subban, and Mark Messier, and he pretty openly talked about how he had no idea what was really going on in the game and in hockey in general, but he kind of owned it and wasn't trying to be a fake expert. He was just incredibly funny, and his energy is extremely infectious, and he makes everybody laugh. It's going to be a real shame if he ends up calling it quits after this upcoming year. But like I mentioned, Kenny Smith and Shaq are both going to make a ton of money as well if they want to continue going along in this right. Now, what does it mean for NBA fans? Again, like I mentioned, Barkley did have the quote about the fact that the NBA is just leaning more towards making as much money as possible. as much as possible. And we saw with the NFL to some degree as well, the way that they have shipped off their Thursday night football games to Amazon. And last year we saw the first ever Peacock game, exclusively streamed on Peacock. And it's just kind of what the future of sports broadcasting is going to be. And it definitely does cut out a large portion of their audience. Now, the streaming records for that Peacock football game between the Dolphins and Chiefs was incredibly high. So they're going to continue to have success is the thing, which is why it's going to continue to go in this direction. But it is a little bit of a shame that I think I saw some graphic on Twitter the other day where it added up all of the different prices of the different streaming services that it takes to be able to watch every football game. And, we're looking at, I think it was $135 was the number that was given up. And that's probably something like a monthly cost there. So again, it's unfortunate the way that this is all unraveling. But again, I think that, they're having success doing it up to this point, and there's no turning back from here. So again, a little bit unfortunate, but not really much you can do about that. But as for what this means in terms of, the league itself and the overall way that it is going to continue to operate for years to come, I would say that ultimately, this is not to be too much expected that, they end up getting all of this money. We're going to see, I would have to imagine, another massive salary cap jump in some point in the next few years, which is going to, it's just a consistent theme. We see it with basketball and the NBA. I would argue we see it in the NFL as well, that, these elite money-making leagues are just going to continue to grow and grow. And that's where, when you look at the conversations around contract negotiations, we have all of these record-breaking deals essentially coming out on a yearly basis. And that's why Jaylen Brown became the highest paid player in NBA history last year, becoming the first $300 million player. And everybody said, or I wouldn't say everybody, but there was a large portion of NBA fans that said he was overpaid there. But by the time that contract expires, he is probably going to be outside of the top 10 highest paid players. And then in the NFL, we look at Jared Goff getting $50 million. Now, that one, I can't say is a no-doubter, a great move to make, but that's just what the market is. Patrick Mahomes signed his $500 million deal years ago, and now he is, he's a little bit underpaid. You can definitely make the argument when you look at some of the money that's been thrown around for a lot of these other, I wouldn't even say middling, because you have the Josh Allens, the Joe Burrows in that conversation as well, which are the closest competition to Mahomes. But when you see all of these other contracts that are being thrown out there, that's why, it benefits to, if you're in these leagues, spend your money early, because contracts are only going to continue to get more expensive, and that is just the way that this all sort of goes. And again, $76 billion in, media revenue just from these media companies, per year. It's just going to continue to be, a more and more lucrative organization, and they're going to have more money than they know what to do with it. So it'll be interesting to see how that all continues to develop as time goes on here. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. But we're going to be switching gears here to some MLB conversations. And yesterday we saw another unbelievable start from the rookie phenom, Paul Skenes, as he pitched seven hitless innings. And he was able to, just absolutely dismantle this Brewers lineup, and it got to a point where it seemed like he was primed to try and make history here, and instead he ended up getting pulled after that seventh inning, which sparked all types of controversy. and we are going to be diving into whether or not that was the right decision for Pittsburgh, and additionally the fact that he was rewarded for that performance and the performance that he's put out on the season as a whole with being named the All-Star starter for the National League in next week's All-Star Game. So we're going to be diving into that. First, we have to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. As now we're going to be switching gears here to the MLB. And we're going to be diving into the start that we saw yesterday from Paul Skenes as he continues to just light the MLB on fire, and because of that, has been named the starter for the All-Star Game for the National League. So we are going to dive into the All-Star conversations, but first have to talk about the way that he was dealing yesterday. Had a no-hitter going for himself through 7 innings with just 1 walk. He had a career-high 11 strikeouts. He flew through the 7th inning with single-digit pitches, and that ultimately led to a lot of disappointment for a lot of MLB fans when Pirates manager Derek Shelton decided to pull him from the game. Now, Skenes threw just 99 pitches. We have seen him hit over 100 a number of times this season, and especially going back to college when he was at LSU, so it was a pretty surprising move at that point. Now, Shelton spoke about his decision after the game. He said, quote, "Everybody makes it about pitch counts. It was about where he was at. It was about trusting your eyes, trusting him." At that point in the game, like I mentioned, he did sort of cruise through that 7th inning, but obviously, manager on the field there, he saw the fatigue that was going on with Skenes. It's a 1-0 ball game at that point. Really didn't get a ton of contributions from their offense, and Shelton's job is to win the game. So I understand what he feels like his obligation. Obviously, we're balancing a couple different things of, obviously, as fans, we are going to be selfish, and, Shelton himself is going to be selfish with trying to protect his job, but for whatever it's worth, it's also his job. Also, for whatever it's worth, the bottom of the order for Milwaukee was coming up, so that was part of what made this decision a little bit surprising. It wasn't like he was going to have to immediately face the top of the third, or the top of the lineup for the 3rd time that game. So, again, definitely a little bit of disappointment that comes with that. Then they bring in Colin Holderman, and immediately he allows a couple hits to break up the overall team's bid at a no-hitter, but he ended up getting out of that inning. Aroldis Chapman closed the door, and they were able to win the game 1-0. So, again, it's his job, that is Derek Shelton's job, to win the game by, just about any means necessary, and that's exactly what happened. I'll be honest, I thought it was pretty lame. Skenes being this emerging potential face of the MLB and to not let him play out this situation is definitely disappointing from a fan's perspective. Could have been a huge moment for the MLB, but, you look at overall too, yes, Shelton's trying to win the game, but it's a long season. One game isn't going to make or break you. So I see the arguments on both sides of this. Ultimately, I do think that he's going to be an ace for the next decade plus, and he's going to have a number of different moments like this on the horizon. But part of what, plays into that as well is the fact that, Skenes needs to stay healthy, and we've seen all of these pitching injuries that have come in the MLB these past number of years, and I don't really mind, whether it's Shelton moving forward or whoever else is Paul Skenes' manager, of being a little bit more conservative with him and just making sure that they protect his arm and his body from himself, where I think it was at least 7 times he threw 120 pitches when he was at LSU. So he's somebody who's already been pretty physically taxed to at least some degree. And, moving forward here, I don't think that we need to necessarily rush Skenes to be anything more than he is, because he's already superb. And, for that reason, he was named an All-Star and is now officially the All-Star Game starter for the National League. And he becomes the 5th pitcher in MLB history to ever, as a rookie, start the All-Star Game. It's the first time that that's happened since 1995. And in my opinion, it is absolutely deserved. You do look, there are some very solid candidates in the National League. Most notably, I would say, is Chris Sale. You can throw Ronaldo Lopez in that conversation as well, as players who were also very much, in contention for that starting spot. But I don't think that either one of them necessarily blows Skenes out of the water in terms of, being the most qualified to start this game. Also, for whatever it's worth, Chris Sale, with how excellent he is probably, I'm curious what his Hall of Fame probability would be, but I would have to imagine that he's, at least going to be in very strong consideration of it. And he's had an excellent career. One thing that would put him over the edge for being a Hall of Famer is winning a Cy Young, and potentially more from a team standpoint this season with the Braves. I think that he's probably the front runner for the National League Cy Young as things currently stand on July 12th. But I can't imagine he really cares about the All-Star Game at this point and sort of where he stands there. He is been in the league for over a decade, and he is trying to, solidify his own legacy. That an All-Star Game start means nothing to him at this point. And, Ronaldo Lopez also, I think he's at a 1.8, something around that for an ERA. Now, he has a FIP over 3, so he's been on the luckier side this year. Still having an incredible season, first-time All-Star, but I just don't think that there is a solidified ace that clearly should have been the starter over Skenes. And this is a big moment for baseball, just generally speaking here. And, even besides the point that he is probably going to be, the face of the MLB, he also absolutely earned this as well. When you look at his season as a whole, after his start yesterday, he got his ERA under a 2. I think he's looking at a 1.9 right now. He has at least 7 strikeouts in 10 of his 11 starts. This is a stat from ESPN, which, sometimes these wordy ESPN stats are kind of nonsense, but I think that this one, means something, that He has the most strikeouts with a sub-2 ERA through 11 starts since ERA became an official statistic in 1913. He has just been absolutely dominant. And, it's been a pleasure to watch him. I think that this is important for the marketing of the MLB. That's kind of been a theme on this show the past week, is talking about the league doing things in order to, make themselves more appealing on a national front. And Skenes is going to be at the forefront if that is ever going to take place. So I think that you give him the runway and you let him shine. And for whatever it's worth as well, I think that it is very interesting when you look at the collection of number one draft picks that we have seen over the past year, and the level of instant success just about that we've seen, where you go back to last summer, it was Victor Wembanyama being drafted by the Spurs, already, known as a top 20 player in the league, runner-up in Defensive Player of the Year, and is, going to be in All-NBA conversations probably next season. Connor Bedard, who is also one of these, elite level prospects that has the hockey world on fire as well. Getting Paul Skenes as the number one pick for the Pirates. And then, we'll see what happens here with Caleb Williams. You go back, a year ago, and Caleb Williams was seen as a little bit of a consensus generational talent among, college football experts and NFL draft experts. Now, maybe a little bit of a disappointing senior year, knocked off some of the shine with Caleb Williams, but still ended up going number one overall, is going into an incredible situation in Chicago, I would say. So, we have a chance to be, witnessing one of, and I keep in mind here at, 23 years old, I understand that maybe some of the historical drafts are, slipping my mind pre my time, but, legitimately these could be, and again, I don't want to say this about Caleb Williams necessarily too much, considering we haven't even seen him take an NFL snap yet, but you are looking at 4 Hall of Fame potential prospects across the 4 major sports in America, and already we've seen 3 of them instantly produce. So, pressure's kind of on you, Caleb Williams, but at the same time, I don't want to get too ahead of myself with any of these prospects, but just something to kind of take into consideration as we look at this unbelievable stretch of number one picks. But let me know, out of that group, who do you have the most faith in to be an all-time talent? Who are you least confident in? And whether or not you think that I'm getting ahead of myself here, because, at least from the ones that I've really been focusing in on Skenes and Wembanyama, they absolutely have the talent to do so. You see the Bedard clips as well. I haven't necessarily, sat down and watched too many Blackhawks games this past year, but, everybody in hockey is raving about him as well. So that is all we have on Skenes right now. We're going to be continuing on talking about baseball here, as I'm going to dive into some thoughts on the Boston Red Sox and where they are sitting here, as they are going to be approaching a massive weekend where they have the potential to overtake the Yankees for second in the American League and further solidify themselves in the postseason, but could also be on the other end where they find themselves out of a playoff spot come All-Star Game weekend. So we are going to be diving into that, as well as the future of their manager, Alex Cora. So we are going to be getting into all of that. But first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we move on here, and we're going to be diving into the series for the Boston Red Sox, where they just took 2 out of 3 against the Oakland Athletics and are further increasing their chances of being in a playoff position when this is all said and done. So we're going to be running through the 3-game series and talking about where they stand overall here. So game 1, the Red Sox won 12-9. They were really powered by an 8-run second inning that was able to pretty much, carry them the length of the way here. We saw all 9 starters end up scoring a run in this game. I think that all happened in the second inning as well. So, really impressive there. We saw Wilyer Abreu, who was phenomenal this series as a whole, break out of an 0-for-16 slump with a home run in that second inning that seemed to, set it off on the right tone. And, in that same inning, like I mentioned, it was an avalanche of Red Sox offense as it was Abreu. And then immediately after, we got a Dom Smith home run on the first pitch. So, the Sox were really able to put it on there. They ended up giving Oakland's pitcher, Estes, I'll double check the pronunciation on that, but gave him Joey Estes, gave him the shortest start of his career, just 1 2/3 innings, and he was out of there pretty quick. But on the other end for the Red Sox, it was a weird start for Brayan, who of course the Red Sox gave the massive contract extension to last offseason. We're hoping that he was going to emerge as their ace, and that just has not been the case so far this season. And like I mentioned, it wasn't a bad start necessarily for Bello, but it was definitely a strange one and felt like it could have been feeling a lot better. So he had a career high 11 strikeouts, which is something to, kind of feel good about. Now, it's not exactly Bello's MO, considering the fact that he's a little bit more of a contact pitcher. And, the punch-outs are cool. You're never going to complain about those, but you're also talking about the Oakland Athletics, where they strike out outside of the Mariners more than anybody in the MLB. But the first 10 outs were all recorded on Bello strikeouts. But during that same stretch there, in both the first and second inning, we saw a significant amount of traffic on the bases, where in this game, again, 5 1/3 inning, 9 hits, 2 walks, and ended up allowing 5 earned runs. Now, I think that ultimately, if you go to that 6th inning where it was Lawrence Butler who ended up just mashing a changeup that Bello left a little bit too much over the plate, you take away that one pitch and, Bello gets out of that situation clean, we're looking at this start a lot differently. But part of the issue for Bello is that we are seeing him just too consistently allowing the long ball, and that some of the contact is sort of what he does. He is a pitcher that, since he's come up into the majors, induces a lot of ground balls. But when that contact is loud, it's really loud. Butler hit this thing, I think the official distance was 457 feet. And, again, this is a situation where at this point, Bello, I was having this debate with some friends as to if the Red Sox weren't winning by as much as they were, would Bello have even still been in the game? I mean, Cora and this pitching staff, the way that they haven't really gotten a ton of quality starts in the past week or so, could definitely have leaned on him, and probably for that reason could have seen him go out a little bit longer. But at that point, Bello's pitch count was running pretty high up, and again, that Butler home run just ultimately ended his game, where that was a 3-run home run and the A's were able to keep it a little bit closer. Bello has just been in this weird stretch as of late where, he had a pretty good start against the Marlins, and you feel like that was maybe something to build off of. Granted, it's the Marlins, and that offense has been very bad this year. So I don't really know where you stand on the evaluation of Bello up to this point. But, when you get that type of production from your offense, it obviously makes things a lot easier for them. Game 2 went to the Athletics, where they won 5-2. The Red Sox offense just did not have that same juice. We've seen them have their moments struggling against left-handed pitching. It hasn't been quite as drastic of a drop-off as I thought from an eye test perspective, but across the board they are a top 10 offense in the league, but against left-handed pitching those numbers become a lot more pedestrian, and JP Sears kind of carved them up in this game. 5 2/3 innings pitched, 4 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, and just 1 earned run that came on a Rob Refsnyder solo shot in the 6th inning. So really just one bad pitch that got away from him. He did load the bases in the 1st inning, but after he got out of that, it was pretty much smooth sailing for him. When Refsnyder went yard, Sears at that point was over the 100 pitch mark. He threw a career high 114 pitches, so he was very impressive in my opinion in this game. He also got another big performance from Lawrence Butler, who is somebody A's fans are probably feeling very good about after this series where, he had the 3-run shot in game 1. In this game, 4 plate appearances, 3 at-bats, 2 hits, a walk, and 2 RBIs. So, he was very productive once again. And this is another situation where you feel pretty weird about how to evaluate the start from the Boston pitcher. This time it was Nick Pivetta, 6 2/3 innings pitched. He allowed 6 hits. He struck out 10, but he allowed 4 earned runs. Another situation where, the strikeouts were dealing for him. At one point, it was around the 3rd, 4th inning. He struck out 8 straight batters, which was very impressive. But the bat out inning came in that 3rd where he got hit around a little bit. And then a couple extra runs, put in there in the 7th inning. Cora admitted that he probably left Pivetta in there a little bit too long. He ended up throwing 105 pitches. This is the second time that he's thrown over 100 this season. In that 7th inning, it was Max Schumann who also had, from a bottom of the lineup guy, had himself a pretty nice series. Ended up scoring in this inning, plus he had the big throw from center field to hose down Jamie Westbrook at the plate on that Rafaela double later in this game. But Schumann and J.J. Bleday strung together a couple hits in the 7th that led to another earned run and ended Pivetta's night. In this game, though, as much as Pivetta, again, kind of hard to evaluate ultimately where to feel about this, the offense was just not enough. They had their chances. The 5th inning, like I mentioned, it was Westbrook being thrown out at home plate. That was after he reached off of an error. And Rafaela had a pretty nice series in this one as well, but weren't able to convert there. 7th inning, they loaded the bases, but Devers ended up grounding out. Last 2 games of this series weren't great for him, and ultimately just not enough production from the offense in this one. And then game 3, rubber match with the Athletics, definitely for where the Red Sox, who had won, I think it was 6 of 7 games at that point, not necessarily wanting to be in this type of a game against the Athletics, but ultimately it was kind of a no sweat one for them where you could just feel that it was different from the first inning on, because just like game 2, they loaded the bases with 2 outs once again. Felt like maybe they weren't going to be able to capitalize, but this time around they did. Luis Medina just never really seemed to settle into this game. His control was a little bit all over the place. The Red Sox, with good plate discipline, were able to take advantage. Masataka Yoshida with a big game for himself in this one. He was able to come through for them, get the offense going with 3 runs in the first inning, and then from there on out, Masa did come back around with a home run later in the game, along with Wong and Abreu, to put up the 7 in this game, and ultimately just close out the Athletics. Tanner Houck was very due for a big-time start. The All-Star that is going to be participating in the All-Star Game for the first time in his career on Tuesday had been coming off of debatably his 2 worst starts of the season versus the Padres and the Yankees, and this time around he was excellent. 6 innings pitched, just 2 hits, a few walks in there as well, but 6 strikeouts, 0 earned runs. Outside of a 6th inning where he ran into some traffic and was able to get out of it, and Alex Cora really commended him for his ability to pull that one out. Thought that he was overall excellent, and the offense just bouncing back in this game, which was huge for them. But, ultimately for the Sox, they are coming into a really big weekend where they are going to be facing the Kansas City Royals, who are at this point, let me double check the number. I think it was 1.5 going into last night's game. Now, after yesterday, it is 1 game back. The Kansas City Royals are of the Red Sox for that final wild card spot. So definitely going to be an important one for the Sox internally. And then, across the division, the Baltimore Orioles and New York Yankees are facing off in a series. Both of them coming off of series losses. The Orioles just got swept by the Cubs and were outscored 21-2 in that series. The Yankees lost their series to the Tampa Bay Rays. So the Red Sox are in a weird position right now where, if things break their way, they could end up second in the American League East by the All-Star break. But if they, end up dropping this series to the Royals, if they get swept, they will be outside of the playoffs altogether. So a little bit of a volatile weekend ahead, and obviously the eyes are on the All-Star break, but the Red Sox don't really have the possibility to, take their foot off the gas just yet. But over this series, we saw manager Alex Cora surpass Bill Kerrigan for the 4th all-time spot in terms of wins by a Red Sox manager, and that does lead to further speculation about what is to come with the Red Sox and whether or not they have plans to bring back Cora moving forward. So we are going to be diving into that conversation next, but first we have to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, and we just wrapped up recapping the series of the Boston Red Sox versus Oakland Athletics. And during that series that the Red Sox won, we saw Alex Cora become the 4th all-time leader in Red Sox history for wins as a manager, and it, in my opinion, would be a no-brainer move for the Red Sox to bring back Alex Cora. But the common belief from a lot of experts right now is that Alex Cora will not be back with the Red Sox next season. Now, it's interesting to break this down because it does, there are two sides to this coin where it is whether or not the Red Sox want to spend the money to bring him back, and it's also whether Alex Cora himself actually wants to return to the organization where, yes, he has had a lot of success since becoming the team's manager, but at the same time, there's definitely been instances of friction between Cora and the management. Didn't seem like he ever got along great with Chaim Bloom with this new takeover of, the future of the organization and their new management group. It hasn't seemed like Cora has necessarily clicked with them either. And I fully believe in Cora as a manager. I talked about this the other week between the series of the Yankees and the Red Sox. The Red Sox ended up coming out on top. I would say that, the Yankees, and obviously different roster constructions, but the Yankees have, the two stars in Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, and, just kind of a bunch of others. And these players, granted, some of them may be a little bit on the older side when you're looking at and by older, I more so mean, past their prime. I mean, DJ LeMahieu was definitely in the older category, but Gleyber Torres, also somebody that they've kind of been waiting on and hasn't necessarily fully emerged. For whatever Anthony Rizzo is at this point, currently dealing with injuries, that's part of that conversation. But I reference that just to say that, you look at what Alex Cora is able to do with the others, even kind of the guys that, not even the top up-and-coming prospects, but what he's turned Dom Smith into as of late. Last year, I think a Red Sox fan favorite was Pablo Reyes, who was DFA'd by the A's, who were horrendous during the 2023 season, and they made him into a legitimate, middle-of-the-lineup guy. And Cora has done, I would say, ultimately, you look at the overall success of the Red Sox, it's really only the 2018 season that was exceedingly winning. Now, 2021, they also made their run to the ALCS that was slightly unexpected, you can make the argument. So it's not like there's been, a ton of success with Boston, but I would say that is more so due to the fact that the front office hasn't necessarily, we know that it's been a massive conflict within Boston in terms of the spending of John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group over the past few years. And ultimately, I think that Cora has done just about as much as he can with the talent that he's been dealt. And now it seems like the Red Sox, who are sitting at 10 games over 500 when that was never the expectation coming into this year, you have to feel very good about where they are currently at. And yet it does seem like we are headed towards a split between Cora and the Red Sox. He is becoming a free agent after this season, and somebody is going to go out and pay him. Now, it's going to be interesting because, Cora is going to look at what Craig Counsell got last offseason from the Cubs after, a pretty successful tenure with the Milwaukee Brewers, of course, but hadn't necessarily had elite success, you could say. You look at sort of the resume for Counsell when he was with Milwaukee. Ultimately, he was the winningest manager in Brewers history at 707 wins during his tenure from 2015 to 2023. So he deserves a ton of credit, and I'm not saying that he isn't a good manager, but it was a lot of regular season success. Now, it was an NLCS appearance in 2018, and they ultimately dropped that to the Dodgers. Cora, at the same time, though, was winning that 2018 World Series with a dominant Red Sox team. Outside of that, Counsell has been top 4 in NL and the National League Manager of the Year voting 3 times in 2017, 18, and 21. But ultimately, not really much playoff success to stand behind Cora also, and I know obviously it's a little bit murky with some of the exact dealings of that Astros championship in 2017, but was a bench coach for that Astros team and was, very well respected in his role there, and then went on to immediately have success with a very talented Red Sox team. And all this to be said, we saw Council last offseason get the 4-year, $40 million deal that made him the highest paid manager in MLB history in terms of average annual value and total money. That Cora's going to look at that and he's going to want his. Now, I don't think that he's going to be getting $8 million a year, but he's definitely going to get a substantial payday from somebody. Now, you look around at the teams that could possibly go out and hire him. I think the number one team that clearly does not care about spending big, and there is a connection there, is the Los Angeles Dodgers, who Cora played for when he was a player in the MLB all those years ago. So that's something that I'm sure he would probably want to have a little bit of a coming home situation. And I think that he just wants respect, and the Red Sox have not done a good job of, putting together doing a good job of actually giving him the respect that he's due. And, I think that Cora is an extremely talented manager that has a very bright future, as he's only actually taken on a lead manager role since 2018. But he is going to be a name that is floated around there. Another name, another team, I should say, is the Philadelphia Phillies, an organization that has sort of been knocking on the door for the past handful of years. I don't think they're going to be in any rush to make some sort of a massive move, especially with the way that they have been cruising through this season so far. Just demolished the Dodgers the past few days, but something to at least consider if they come short in the playoffs again. I'm not saying that's the right decision necessarily, but something to consider there. I think Red Sox fans' worst nightmare would be him going to the Yankees, depending on what happens with Aaron Boone there. But all of it sort of comes back to, I feel like if the Red Sox were willing to give him a respectable contract, I think he's somewhere in the $3 million range right now, that if they give him the money that he deserves, maybe he would be willing to stick around. I'm not sure. I do think that whatever happens during this season's trade deadline is going to actually have some sort of an impact on Cora in terms of whether or not he believes that this is a front office that is actually going to be willing to spend in the years come, willing to put together the proper roster around him to have success. So it's a weird limbo that we're at right now with the Red Sox. And again, we just talked about it in the last segment, but the way that they are sitting here right now with a chance to be second in the American League East headed into the All-Star break, depending on how this weekend shakes out. If the Orioles have success and beat up on the Yankees a little bit, and the Red Sox end up winning their series against the Royals, it is very possible that they could be second in the division, which every single Red Sox fan would take given the expectations coming into this year. And again, I do think that is somewhat of a testament to Alex Cora and the way that he has been able to sort of bring this group up over the course of the past couple of years with this younger core. And I think it would be a mistake for the Red Sox to let him walk, but I wouldn't say that this Red Sox organization hasn't been prone to making mistakes every once in a while throughout the past couple years. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section about the situation at hand for the Red Sox and this debate, where you think what other teams you think could be in the market for a new manager that have some money to spend, because Cora is probably going to be the number one managing commodity this offseason, I would have to guess. But we're going to be taking our final break now, and when we come back on the other side, I have some unresolved NBA questions from the first month of free agency, or the first month of the offseason, I should say, with some questions about prominent contenders such as the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, even you can throw the New Orleans Pelicans in there. So we're going to be diving into all of that, but first a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we are now just about a month into the NBA offseason. I think that the finals wrapped up on June 17th, so coming here on July 12th, we are just about 30 days past, and there are still a number of questions that remain sort of unresolved in terms of some of the bigger names and franchises in the NBA that we're going to be diving into here. The first of which is, are the Bucks going to shake anything up? We have been hearing about the idea of a Brook Lopez trade for a couple of months now, and I'm not sure if we can really expect anything to come here. You look at what the Bucks did this offseason. Now, I do like DeLon Wright. I've talked about this on the show in the past, that, for him going from a not very good organization, I think he started last year on the Washington Wizards, and, was kind of being wasted away there. The Heat ended up acquiring him halfway through the year, and he was fine. Ultimately, he had just about no chemistry with the team, and the Heat were a little bit of a mess as well in terms of injuries and such, but, when you look at what the Bucks have actually done this offseason, there's really not much to that, especially with the draft, where you talk about a Bucks team that you saw was definitely not as deep as the Pacers, who they faced in the first round, and there is a very good argument to be made that if the Bucks are fully healthy, that they are able to beat the Pacers, possibly handedly, with Giannis and Lillard if they were fully healthy, but they end up dropping that game. Feels like they needed players to help round out what they had, and with the draft, they got 2 project players to play under Doc Rivers, who last year we saw Rivers entirely abandon some of the youth minutes to the likes of Andre Jackson Jr. and with Marjon Beauchamp, both of which had shown some sort of upside. Now, I feel like that would be one of the bigger things if I'm Doc, especially I'm pretty high on Andre Jackson. I feel like he can be a very good perimeter defender that they desperately need, considering where their defense was last season. I feel like he's a very coachable player as well, played under Dan Hurley at UConn, and I think can shape into, something substantial there. I forgot to mention as well, they did also sign Taurean Prince as well to a veteran minimum. And Prince, I thought, he played probably more for the Lakers than you would prefer if you are a championship contending team. But I don't think that Prince is bad. I know a lot of Lakers fans were sort of dissing him throughout the course of the year, but he's a fine player and he can definitely, make up for some of those Jay Crowder minutes. Now, there's still a number of those more veteran players that were contributing for them last year that have remained unsigned, including Patrick Beverley and Jay Crowder, and I think there's another name in that category as well. But the Bucks are going to have to find a way to sort of round out their roster, and that's a start. But are they going to do anything to actually sort of change the identity of what they have? And again, the Brook Lopez trade would sort of be the only way to go about that. But being in the financial situation that they currently are in anyways, I'm not sure if that is ever going to happen. Now, if they were to trade Lopez, I think that a team that would absolutely be in the running for, a potential suitor is the New Orleans Pelicans, where my biggest question about them, and I understand they're not exactly the sexiest team to talk about on a national scale, but I believe in the infrastructure that they have, and they could surprise some people next year if fully healthy. Specifically, you're looking at Zion and Brandon Ingram for that one. But who are they planning on starting at center right now? Because as things stand, Yves Missi, the first-round pick that they took this past year out of Baylor, is the only center on the roster. And I've said it a number of times. I like Missi. I think that he is a good player, and I would buy into him long term. I think the Pelicans fans should be excited about that draft selection, but he's not going to be somebody you can heavily lean on, especially in this Western Conference for the entirety of the season, and specifically looking at the playoffs when he has to face the likes of Nikola Jokic or Anthony Davis or Karl Anthony Towns. They're going to be at a loss there. And, you look at Zion with maybe his weight and his general size, that he is could be considered a big, but he's been kind of massively disappointing in terms of rebounding throughout the course of his career, and I think that would be a massive hole if he's playing your 5 for you. So they definitely need to make a move. Brook Lopez could be an interesting one, and I think that the Pelicans have a number of forwards and that they could sort of throw in a deal here. Now, contract-wise, I don't have the trade machine running for me right now, and that's obviously a whole different game of limbo that you have to play for both of these teams, considering, the Bucks hovering around that second luxury tax apron, so it's a difficult sort of way to go about that, but it is something interesting to take into consideration there. But I was just talking about the Bucks and whether or not they were going to shake anything up. Same can sort of be said for the Miami Heat as to, is anything going to change for them next year? Because the Heat are coming off of, I've said in the past it's 2 years. Really, it's only one season removed from being in the NBA Finals in 2023. And you feel like you have a lot of those same key players. Now, they just lost Caleb Martin this offseason. They lost Gabe Vincent last offseason. So it's not the exact same roster, but it is, mostly a lot of the same contributing players. And whether or not that is going to be enough. And especially coming off of a weird end to the season where you have Jimmy Butler, who was, of course, injured during the play-in tournament game against Philadelphia. He is talking all this noise during, those coming weeks, and you have Pat Riley calling him out because of it at his exit interview that, for Jimmy, who has missed a number of games since coming to Miami, that you kind of feel like you need more from someone like him, especially for how much he talks. And again, he led them to a finals appearance in both 2020 and 2023. So you can't be critical about Jimmy Butler in terms of, is he, conductive to winning? The answer is pretty clearly yes, but does he still have that same sort of superpower where we've seen playoff Jimmy, come into play, especially, mostly so looking at the Milwaukee series from 2023, but, there are still a lot of things that are kind of unresolved in terms of what is going to be different next year. And I think that health is obviously the number one thing you point to, that Jimmy Butler wasn't healthy. Terry Rozier was a midseason acquisition, and he wasn't healthy. Tyler Hero missed a lot of the regular season. So you're thinking that maybe if they all come together, that they can develop a chemistry that, has more success moving forward. But at the same time, Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero are on these big money deals, and you don't necessarily feel great about their level of production from a value standpoint based off of how much they're being paid. The Heat are probably going to be hoping, I would have to imagine, that Tyler Hero can re-up some of his stock and his trade value and can end up being a deadline acquisition for somebody. I've talked about the fact that maybe they're a suitor for Brandon Ingram halfway through the season. I don't know if that's happening now because I'm not sure necessarily what the Heat, it would be Hero, maybe one of their draft picks from these past couple years, but it feels like the Heat are also are going to be at least somewhat reliant on the likes of Jaime Jaquez Jr. We'll see how much Khalil Ware plays this upcoming year as he continues to impress during the Summer League. But I don't believe that there is a super clean-cut answer for what the Heat is. And I talked about this earlier this week, that I am a believer that with a fully healthy season, this team can look like a different version of themselves, a better version of themselves, specifically on the offensive end, where at times they were atrocious. But we'll sort of have to see there. And if it's a wait and see, it's wait and see. But the Heat really haven't done anything to, I would say, address significant needs. But again, we'll see on that. And then very quickly here, last question here is, what are the Jazz doing? Because they are also in a situation here where they're just kind of sitting in place. And for a team that is, I think they finished, 12th or so in the Western Conference last year, and a team that, 2 years ago was actually in the play-in tournament conversation before they ended off selling off some pieces for the sake of trying to be a little bit worse, as well as they were, hunting the Victor Wembanyama draft, at least, marginally. But last year they just weren't that good, and Lauri Markkanen wasn't quite as special as he was a couple years ago when he made his first All-Star appearance. And Lauri is, I said it before, he might be, in terms of playing basketball today in 2024, it's between him and Paul George that would be the most impactful player movements of the offseason. And the Jazz do have all the cards where there's zero level of desperation, and if you know anything about Danny Ainge, the general manager, he sort of operates without a timetable typically. He just makes the best move possible at any given time, at least what he views as the best possible move to get the most value possible, and worries about the wins and losses column later. But you're looking at a 2025 draft that has a ton of standout freshman talent that's coming into college basketball this upcoming year. And, especially with Cooper Flagg, who is expected to be, a grade A prospect, that the Jazz, are they going to make a move here and try and pick a direction, or are they just going to keep floating around until something glaring comes across their table and they fire off in either direction towards competing or tanking? But a lot of different ways to look at their situation. Let me know how you feel, and let me know what questions you still have about the current landscape of the NBA. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back on Monday afternoon. Have yourselves a great weekend. Take care. We will see you on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.